Many who have studied the history of the early church have marveled at its growth and spread. For any movement to grow as large over just a few generations as Christianity did is indeed a tremendous feat. But for a movement like ours, which originated in a backwater province of the Roman Empire, sprung out from an overlooked tribal religion, was founded by a criminal and enjoyed no imperial favor. For a movement like that to not just survive, but thrive, has often been heralded as a miracle. Yet to me, the greatest miracle of Jesus' ministry was not its millionth follower, but its first. For when a thing begins to catch on, it's no wonder why people begin to jump on the bandwagon. But before all that, before the miracles, before the resurrection, before the gift of the Holy Spirit had been poured out on Pentecost, the true miracle is not where this Jesus movement went, but how following Jesus got started at all. Each of the Gospels has their own take on what attracted Jesus' first disciples to him. The first three Gospels each present a fairly similar story of how things started. Jesus comes to the lakeside, beckoning Peter and company to follow him, promising that if they lay down their nets, he will make them fishers of men. From these images have sprung the most popular views of what discipleship is. Those of following Jesus into evangelical mission, foreshadowing the great commission Jesus gives to go and make disciples of every nation. But, as always, John's Gospel takes a different view from that of Matthew, Mark, or Luke. Here, it is not Jesus, but rather John the Baptist who calls and promises the potential disciples, who then begin following Jesus quite literally, without exchanging so much as a word with him. In essence, they just start stalking Jesus, tailing him until he finally turns around and says, "What are you looking for?" Now, we might want to imagine that these words had some gravitas to them, that it was a question as serious as the one that Jesus asks in the Garden of Gethsemane that sends the centurions knocked down to the ground. Or we might want to think it a philosophical question, like the one that Pilate asks Jesus at his trial, "What is truth?" But really, Jesus could have easily just been perturbed to find two men on his heels unannounced, hoping to scare them off, or at least to find out what was going on in their minds. No, the question with real weight today, the one which should capture our attention, is the question these men give in reply. Where are you staying? More than the other Gospels, John sets the tone for what it means to be a disciple, getting to the heart of discipleship with this one question. Note first what the question these men ask does not seek after. It is not asking for wisdom or teaching, nor for advice or greater purpose to life. Their question asks for one thing, and one thing only. It asks for fellowship. To be where Jesus is. To call his home their own. To be with him at the ending of the day and the beginning of the next. To be a disciple is not merely to learn, to grow, to follow, to believe. It is all those things, yes, but still something more. It is a calling to be together, to no longer be alone. For you see, loneliness has been the problem since the beginning. God looked upon the first human being and saw that it was not good for them to be alone. And so came the last act of creation. Not something different or something new, but something more. Another human. Companionship, fellowship, a remedy to loneliness. Only then was the work complete. And so too, fellowship is the beginning and foundation of our lives together in Christ. Fellowship with Him, leading to fellowship with one another, and ultimately a new creation. Whatever else it means to follow Jesus, whatever knowledge we gain or wisdom we accrue, whatever joy we uncover or love we share, whatever spiritual gifts we receive, we have them only in and through fellowship. Only together with one another as the body of Christ. It is for this reason that throughout John's Gospel, the language Jesus uses to describe his followers is built around their fellowship. I do not call you servants any longer, Jesus tells them, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, he continues, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. In the company of Christ, there is no private illumination. Neither delight nor grief is felt by one alone. No, but to follow Christ is to receive all things together. It is the gift that our joys are to be multiplied and sorrows divided. It is the bounty of a harvest that only increases the more it is shared. Of course, it is not all sunshine and roses, discipleship. In seeking company with Jesus, these erstwhile disciples did not know what they were asking for. They had not yet realized that, while foxes have holes and the birds of the air nests, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. The road the disciples walked with Christ was not easy. And Jesus' triumphant resurrection did not mean smooth sailing from then on out. No, it meant going out to the ends of the world, spreading the good news to an unreceptive audience. Once the disciples departed for this work, it is likely that many of them never met again in their lives, coming instead to lonely inns in strange and foreign lands. So too, for us to have fellowship is not only to experience joy together. To have fellowship as disciples of Christ is also to feel sorrow when we are apart. And just as the disciples were sent out into the world, for us also, discipleship means going out, departing in the name of fellowship. Each of us, in our own time and way, will hear God's call to set our eyes to new horizons, to humble ourselves before the breadth of this vast communion, and to say goodbye, not knowing when hello will come again. Whether our time with one another was for a moment or a lifetime, it will never have felt like enough before it comes to an end. And yet the letting go is no less a part of fellowship than the being together. We cannot have the one without the other. But if all that appears daunting, do not think it is better to go through this life alone. For the true grace of discipleship is that the fellowship it rests on never ends. And just as nothing can separate us from the love of God, so too can the ties which bind us to one another never be loosed. They form in an instant, they last an eternity. And no chasm is so wide that it cannot be spanned by them. For as John reminds us, Christ has gone before us to prepare a dwelling place. And there are many rooms. So too in this life, we can go where God leads us with glad and joyful hearts, knowing that if the river Styx cannot divide us from one another, how much less can the waters and rivers of this world separate what God has united together in the waters of baptism. For it does not take a lifetime to come to know great love. No. But it only took the life of Christ poured out for us in love, giving us one another as a family in this life, we together, if not in body, always in spirit, in this life and the next. And no matter how many billions of other faithful await us there, know that it will feel as intimate as when those first two disciples, lockstep, set down that road, wondering where Jesus would take them.